You're listening to the Infinite Banking Mastery Podcast. Did you know that you could build a tax-free pool of wealth that's liquid and accessible all your life while building your retirement nest egg? Gain full control of your financial future and stop relying on the government and banks. The wealthy have already discovered this wealth-building secret. Now it's your turn to get financially secure without following the conventional wisdom that keeps you in debt to banks. Now here's your host, Valerie LaRocque.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Infinite Banking Mastery Podcast. Thank you for listening in. I hope you've had a spectacular week. I thought I would speak today on a topic that I spoke to yesterday to a group of business owners. I thought, well, I should share that on the podcast. I think it's a very important topic, that is protecting your greatest and most valuable asset. This topic is covering long-term disability coverage, and I have spoken about this a couple of times before in earlier podcasts. It's just so important because if you're not covering this risk or have a plan for being out of work for a long period of time due to sickness or illness or injury, disability, then you easily can spend through your retirement savings, any savings you have in your infinite banking whole life policy. You can spend through all those assets very quickly. And so protecting against this risk helps you to maintain your policy and helps you to maintain your savings goals and your retirement goals and not just burn right through those assets in the event of a terrible illness or a terrible accident or injury. So I thought I would start off with just sharing 4 of the big myths around why people don't get long-term disability coverage. Truly, if you have a job, if you have income from your job, or even if you're a business owner, you should have disability coverage. Myth number 1. Well, I'd rely on my savings until I could get back to work. Well, unfortunately, most people overestimate the resources that they have to cover their expenses. If an injury or a disabling illness were to prevent them from working and earning their paycheck. According to a Life Foundation survey, about half of working Americans say they couldn't make it a month without having financial difficulties. And more than 1 in 4 would have problems immediately. So we want to keep that in mind, that illnesses and sickness, some sort of disease that you might get in your lifetime definitely can last for months or even years. I know probably all of you know someone who's gotten sick and has not been able to work, or has gotten sick and haven't been able to work for a period of time, a year or more. And so we want to protect against that in the event that that would happen to us. Myth number 2, I don't need it. I don't work in a dangerous profession. So a lot of people are just, when they hear the word disability insurance, they just are thinking, oh, if I get injured, hurt, or in an accident, I'm a super careful person. That's not likely to happen to me. I drive really carefully. My job's not dangerous. So they just simply don't expect that it will happen to them. But you actually have a 3 in 10 chance of suffering a disabling injury, illness or injury during your career that would keep you out of work for 3 months or more. Certainly, there are more difficult jobs out there where the risk level is more likely you could get hurt, or maybe if you're in construction and your back now is starting to hurt, or your knees. That's why it's important to get disability coverage before you start feeling bad, before you might have back problems or knee problems, because if you acquire it once you have those pains already or those things you're dealing with or a diagnosis, it's likely that the insurance underwriters will exclude what you're already experiencing. Now, it doesn't mean they can't drop off that exclusion at some future point. So definitely still worthwhile acquiring the coverage, especially because even though you might have a back exclusion because you've been seeing the chiropractor and you have a disc gout or something like that, even if you have that already documented, there are really just so many things that could cause you to become too sick or hurt to work. I have people all the time come and say, oh, well, if I have that exclusion, I might as well not get it, because that's definitely what would cause me to be disabled. But let me tell you, there are just so many things. It's still a good idea to get that coverage in place, and then you may be able to get that exclusion dropped off in the future. And even if you're sitting at a desk all day, the odds for suffering a long-term disability are high for everyone because illness and not accidents account for 90% of disabilities that end up keeping people from being able to go to work. So you might just think it's because I have a rough job or I don't have a tough job. I'm just sitting all the time, so I'm going to be fine. But really, it's illness that has been causing people to be unable to work because they're feeling too sick. Myth number 3, the government will provide assistance if I get disabled. A lot of people put a lot of dependence and they just trust and expect that the government will take care of them if they get sick or hurt. According to the National Safety Council, 90% of long-term disabilities are a result of injury or illness that is not work-related and therefore wouldn't qualify for something like workman's comp. So you can't depend on that program helping you out necessarily. And if you were thinking, well, Social Security, they got my back, I can go get those Social Security benefits, it's important to know that at least 65% of those who apply for Social Security are initially denied. And so if you're suffering, you can't work, you're trying to, go through the hoops and obstacles of trying to acquire Social Security disability, I'm sure it's a process to do that, quite a process. And so they oftentimes, after doing all that and you're not feeling good and you're trying to acquire this coverage, then 65% are denied. So it can certainly take a while to get approval for those Social Security disability benefits. And then once you are approved, the average monthly benefit is just around $1,500 a month. Of course, it's possible to get a higher payout than that. Really just depends on how much you've put into the program, Social Security, and how long you've been working and all of that, how much your benefit will be. It's based on your record of covered earnings. So just the same as you don't want to depend on Social Security for your retirement savings, or at least not solely. Maybe if we get it, great, but you don't want to depend on it. Same for disability. You don't want to have to depend on Social Security for your disability payments if you were to become too sick or hurt to work, because you're going to need that money and you're going to need it soon. You don't want to wait a long time for them to deny you and approve you. That's why it's best to just have an individual policy. Myth number 4, I have disability coverage at work. Now, this is certainly one I hear all the time, and I think it's great if you have disability through work. It's just important to check out what that coverage actually is. Is it short-term? Is it long-term? A lot of companies don't do long-term disability, and then there are some companies that do. So you just want to know what you have and what your benefit is. You should ask human resources, what's my benefit? How much coverage do I have? Oftentimes they state that something like you have access to 50% of your income up to a cap of $10,000 a month or something like that. And another thing to note is if the company is paying for that benefit, it will be taxable to you. And if you're paying for the benefit, it will be tax-free to you. So when you're paying the premium actually is better, which what ends up happening when you have an individual policy, because you're paying that premium, your benefits are tax-free to you, which will be very helpful because even if you maxed out your disability coverage as much as possible, you can't cover more than roughly 60% of your income. So already you're going to be receiving a lot less income than you are accustomed to. And so you're going to want to have as much of that as all of it, if you can, have it be tax-free to you, more of that money, so that you are receiving as much of that benefit as you can for you to use, not just to go to taxes. According to the Social Security Administration, 69% of workers in the private sector don't have long-term disability coverage, and short-term may not be enough. Short-term usually doesn't last all that long. Maybe enough for, so you have a broken leg or something like that. Short-term will be helpful. But if you have a major illness and you're likely to not work for a long time, say a year or more, or all the way to your retirement years, you're going to want to have long-term disability in place. So I got these 4 myths and this information from a company called lifehappens.org. They go over both life and disability and just the importance of that coverage. If this topic interests you and you see the importance of it, and you're wondering, how much disability coverage do I need? Well, in my opinion, I would say take as much as you can, because again, it's only about 60% of your income. But if you feel like you wouldn't need that full 60%, there are some calculators you can access on the Life Foundation and nonprofit Life Foundation website. That is protectyourpaycheck.org. You can access their disability insurance needs calculator, kind of play around with those numbers. Well, that's all I have for you today on this topic. I'm going to elaborate some more next week and give some examples of occupations and people who have had to use their disability insurance so you can kind of get an idea of those payouts and what it looked like for them. I'm going to cover that next week in a podcast on this topic again, because again, I just feel like protecting your greatest asset, which is your ability to earn an income, is the most important thing for your retirement, for the opportunities you hope to take, to reach your goals in this life, to provide for your family, for yourself. How close would you come to achieving your goals without an income? Therefore, I'm going to elaborate some more next week. In the meantime, if you would like to partner with me for help with your life or disability insurance planning, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect with you. Thanks again for listening. Have a great week.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.